how could a so-called primitive society have achieved such sophisticated stone carving techniques? Check out this block right here. Something really cool about this one. So what is going on here?
Puma Punku is one of Bolivia's most puzzling archaeological sites, famous for enormous stone blocks cut with such remarkable precision that they almost look machine-made. For years, that precision fueled everything from conventional engineering theories to wild claims about lost technology and even extraterrestrials. But a new wave of research in 2025 appeared to offer a far more surprising explanation, and it has less to do with aliens than with the ingenuity of the people who actually built the site. For more ancient mysteries, subscribe now and uncover the truth with us. The real mystery surrounding Puma Punku may not simply be how these massive stones were shaped, but why they were constructed this way and what the builders were trying to achieve. And once researchers began examining the site with modern technology, some long-standing assumptions started to look very different. Scientists revisit Puma Punku. In early 2025, researchers returned their attention to Puma Punku, the ancient monumental complex located high in Bolivia's Andes. For decades, archaeologists and historians had struggled to explain the extraordinary workmanship visible across the site. Huge blocks contain carefully angled surfaces, straight grooves, and interlocking shapes that appear remarkably sophisticated for their age. Then, during conservation work that began in late 2024, previously overlooked stone fragments were recovered from accumulated sediment around the site. These pieces contained unusual cuts and grooves that immediately attracted attention. What kind of tools created them? And could these fragments provide clues about how the original builders achieved such precision? Instead of relying only on traditional excavation, researchers began applying modern techniques, including laser scanning, three-dimensional imaging, photogrammetry, and microscopic analysis. For the first time, the surviving stones could be examined in extraordinary detail without extensively disturbing the ancient structure. The goal was simple: separate genuine evidence from centuries of speculation. The investigation also brought together specialists from several fields, including archaeology, geochemistry, computational reconstruction, ancient construction techniques, and indigenous knowledge. Local Aymara elders were included as well, allowing researchers to compare archaeological evidence with traditions that had been passed down through generations. Their accounts included references to natural materials, stoneworking practices, seasonal alignment, and communal construction rituals. Some researchers believed these traditions offered valuable clues that could be tested against the physical evidence. Modern technology then transformed the investigation. Drones photographed the site from angles impossible to capture from the ground, while high-resolution photogrammetry and LiDAR generated detailed three-dimensional models of the surviving structures. The result was something earlier archaeologists never had: a digital record precise enough to examine every visible surface, groove, angle, and connection between the stones. And that was when the real mystery of Puma Punku began to change. But the investigation wasn't simply about collecting impressive images. Researchers wanted to understand whether the patterns hidden within the ruins could reveal how Puma Punku was originally designed. That's where artificial intelligence entered the picture. Using machine learning tools, the team analyzed enormous amounts of imaging data and created detailed digital reconstructions of the site. As the models processed the information, they began identifying repeating measurements, geometric relationships, alignments, and symmetrical patterns that were difficult to recognize with the naked eye. The results suggested that the stones may not have been positioned randomly. Their arrangement appeared to follow a deliberate architectural system, with carefully planned proportions and possible astronomical alignments. The more researchers reconstructed, the clearer one thing became: The builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of geometry, engineering, and the surrounding landscape. Then another discovery added an entirely new dimension. Ground-penetrating surveys revealed possible channels and structural features beneath parts of the site that may have been connected to water management. If confirmed, this could mean Puma Punku was more than a ceremonial complex. Its builders may have deliberately designed parts of the site to control, redirect, or interact with water. But perhaps the most surprising clues came from microscopic examination of the stones themselves. Researchers reported unusual organic traces associated with some tool marks, raising the possibility that natural plant-based substances may have been used during construction. Rather than requiring some mysterious lost technology, the evidence could point towards something much more familiar: ancient builders making highly intelligent use of materials available in their environment. And that changes the entire story. Puma Punku may not represent technology that defies explanation. It may represent technology we underestimated. The same idea became even more interesting when researchers began digitally reconstructing the original architecture. For generations, the site had appeared to be little more than scattered megalithic blocks, including the famous H-shaped stones that have inspired countless theories. But detailed 3D modeling suggested that these stones may have once formed part of a much larger and carefully organized architectural system. By digitally fitting the surviving pieces together, researchers could begin visualizing Puma Punku as it may have looked before centuries of collapse, destruction, and reuse transformed the landscape. And suddenly, those strange H-shaped blocks didn't seem quite so strange. Their unusual geometry may have been intentional, allowing individual stones to connect with other architectural elements in a highly organized construction system. The mystery was no longer simply, how could ancient people have built this? The more important question became, how much did these builders actually understand that we have underestimated? Was it symbolic, decorative, or simply a coincidence? According to architectural historian Dr. Sofia Mendez, the answer appears to be none of these. The H-shaped blocks seem to have been functional components of a carefully planned construction system. Digital analysis suggests that their angles, grooves, and surfaces were deliberately shaped so they could connect with other stones like massive three-dimensional puzzle pieces. Researchers identified several different H-block variations, each apparently serving a specific purpose within the larger structure. Instead of simply carving enormous stones and stacking them together, the builders may have been working with a standardized modular system. Even more impressive, measurements from different blocks revealed recurring proportions and ratios, suggesting that the construction followed a consistent mathematical framework. But how did the Tiwanaku builders achieve this level of precision without the machinery available to modern engineers? To explore that question, researchers used the reconstructed stones to create a complete digital model of Puma Punku. For the first time, they could virtually move through the complex and examine how its different structures may have worked together. The reconstruction suggested that Puma Punku was far from a random collection of fallen stones. Its platforms, courtyards, and pathways appear to have followed a deliberate geometric layout, with strong alignment toward the cardinal directions. Then came another fascinating discovery: water. Digital simulations suggested that channels built into the complex could have directed water through specific areas during ceremonies. If accurate, the water may have been more than a practical feature. It could have created movement, reflection, and sound, turning the architecture itself into part of the ritual experience. The reconstruction also revealed what may have been a carefully controlled movement through the site. Some areas appear relatively open, while others become increasingly restricted, suggesting that access may have depended on a person's status or role. But the researchers didn't stop with computers. They created physical scale models of the H-shaped blocks and tested how the pieces connected, how the structures responded to simulated stress, and how sound behaved within the reconstructed spaces. The results suggested that the unusual cuts and interlocking geometry may actually have helped ancient builders position and stabilize the stones rather than making construction more difficult. And then the acoustic tests produced another surprise. Sounds generated in one section of the reconstructed platform could travel remarkably clearly to another area. That raises the possibility that the builders intentionally designed parts of Puma Punku to control and amplify sound during ceremonies. If that interpretation is correct, then Puma Punku wasn't simply a monument built from enormous stones. It may have been a carefully engineered environment where geometry, water, movement, and sound were all part of the experience. Could this mean the Tiwanaku builders understood acoustics as well as architecture? It's certainly possible, but the bigger conclusion is even more remarkable. After years of analysis and reconstruction, Puma Punku no longer looks like a random collection of collapsed stones. Instead, the evidence suggests a highly organized complex in which the blocks, angles, platforms, water channels, and possibly even sound were carefully planned. But researchers weren't finished. Geochemical clues to ancient stone construction. In 2025, laboratory analysis introduced another surprising possibility. Perhaps the mystery of Puma Punku isn't only about how the stones were shaped, but how some of them were made. Scientists examined samples of andesite and sandstone using advanced techniques such as scanning electron microscopy, EDX, X-ray diffraction, and thin section analysis. The results reportedly revealed unusual chemical and structural features that raised questions about whether some construction materials had been deliberately modified by humans. In certain andesite samples, researchers reported traces of carbon and nitrogen-rich material, elements that would seem unusual in naturally formed volcanic rock. That immediately raised a difficult question. How could organic compounds have become associated with these stones? The sandstone samples offered another intriguing clue. Researchers observed an unusual matrix binding the individual grains together, something they argued did not fit neatly with ordinary natural sandstone formation. There were also unusual concentrations of sodium and minerals such as albite. Some researchers connected these findings with the possibility that alkaline materials were deliberately introduced during construction, potentially sourced from salt-rich environments of Bolivia's Altiplano. And this is where the controversial geopolymer theory enters the story. The theory proposes that at least some ancient stone blocks may have been produced by combining crushed or naturally occurring stone material with a binding substance, creating a material that could be shaped or cast before hardening. If that were ever conclusively demonstrated at Puma Punku, it would dramatically change the debate surrounding the site. Instead of asking only how ancient workers carved enormous blocks with incredible precision, researchers would have to consider whether some of those blocks were actually manufactured through an ancient form of stone casting. Even more fascinating are the traditional stories from the Andes describing plants or natural substances capable of altering stone. For a long time, such accounts were generally treated as folklore rather than technical evidence. But if future laboratory work confirms the presence of plant-derived compounds or ancient binding agents, those stories would deserve a much closer examination. The possibility is extraordinary. Perhaps the builders of Puma Punku weren't using mysterious technology at all. Perhaps they understood chemistry, geology, materials science, and construction far better than we have given them credit for. The evidence seemed to point toward one extraordinary possibility. Perhaps the massive stones of Puma Punku were not simply carved into shape, but actually cast. Instead of quarrying enormous blocks, transporting them across difficult terrain, and cutting every surface by hand, the ancient builders may have combined crushed rock, clay, alkaline minerals, and plant-based materials to create a stone-like mixture that could be shaped in molds and allowed to harden. If true, this would completely transform how we understand Tiwanaku engineering. Rather than being limited by primitive tools, these builders may have developed an early form of advanced materials technology, using chemistry to accelerate processes that normally occur naturally over far longer periods. It would also help explain the remarkable surfaces, sharp corners, and interlocking designs that have made Puma Punku so famous. What once looked impossible might actually be evidence of practical human innovation rather than anything extraterrestrial. But the story doesn't end with construction. The deeper researchers looked, the more they began asking whether the builders had incorporated something else into the site: the geometry of the heavens themselves, the sacred geometry of Puma Punku. For generations, Puma Punku has been treated primarily as an engineering mystery. But newer investigations have raised another possibility. Perhaps the complex was designed not only around stone and architecture, but also around astronomy. Researchers examining the layout began noticing relationships between the site's proportions, orientations, and celestial events. This raised a much bigger question. Was Puma Punku more than a ceremonial complex? Could it also have functioned as a kind of astronomical calendar or sacred representation of the sky? According to this interpretation, the Tiwanaku builders may have deliberately incorporated astronomical knowledge into the architecture. The positioning of structures and open spaces appears to follow patterns that suggest more than simple coincidence. One particularly intriguing possibility involves the movement of the sun during important points of the year. Researchers have examined whether certain architectural features could have framed sunrise positions during events such as the equinoxes or solstices. Imagine standing inside the ancient complex as the first sunlight of a significant day passed through a carefully positioned opening and illuminated a specific part of the structure. Without telescopes, satellites, or modern instruments, how could ancient builders achieve such precision? The answer may be surprisingly simple: generations of careful observation. By tracking the sun, moon, and stars over countless seasons, ancient astronomers could accumulate an impressive understanding of celestial cycles. But then, researchers noticed something that made the story considerably more controversial. Some proposed astronomical alignments did not perfectly match the positions expected today. Instead of dismissing the discrepancy, researchers considered the effects of long-term changes in Earth's orientation and the sky. When those calculations were applied, some interpretations produced extremely ancient dates, potentially reaching thousands of years before the accepted age of the Tiwanaku civilization. That is where the theory becomes highly disputed. A proposed alignment reaching back nearly 17,000 years would predate not only Puma Punku, but virtually every conventional timeline associated with complex monumental architecture. Most archaeologists do not accept that as evidence that the site itself is 17,000 years old. Alternative explanations, measurement uncertainties, and the possibility of coincidental alignments all have to be considered. Still, the idea raises an irresistible question. Were the Tiwanaku builders simply observing the sky themselves, or could some astronomical traditions have been inherited from much earlier generations? And if ancient knowledge really was passed down for thousands of years, then Puma Punku may represent only the final chapter of a much older story. Could our understanding of human development be missing something? The possibility becomes even more intriguing when we look at one of the most important symbols associated with the ancient Andes, the chacana, or Andean cross. The chacana represented different levels of existence: the underworld, the earthly realm, and the heavens. Some researchers believe this concept may have influenced the design of the Tiwanaku complex itself. Nearby structures, including the Akapana, appear to share geometric similarities with the cross-shaped symbol. Its terraces and central features have even been interpreted as representing a connection between different realms of existence. From above, parts of the complex seem to repeat similar geometric patterns. And then there are the famous carved gateways. For years, their markings were viewed primarily as religious or decorative symbols. But another interpretation suggests that some of these designs may have been connected to the movement of the sun, helping ancient observers track important points such as solstices and equinoxes. Even the site's water system may have carried symbolic meaning. That combination of architecture, astronomy, geometry, and water raises a fascinating possibility. Perhaps Puma Punku wasn't simply a collection of temples and platforms. Maybe it functioned as a spiritual landscape designed to connect the earthly world with the heavens. But what exactly was Puma Punku? For decades, its incredible stonework encouraged theories about lost civilizations and even extraterrestrial intervention. The precision of the blocks seemed so extraordinary that many people assumed ancient humans couldn't possibly have achieved it themselves. Modern archaeology points to something far more impressive than aliens: human ingenuity. The massive stones could be shaped through pounding, grinding, and polishing, while drag marks and lifting holes reveal practical methods for moving them. Their precise angles were the result of patience, skill, and advanced craftsmanship, not mysterious technology. Similar traditions found at nearby sites like Pokhara and Chiripa show that Puma Punku was part of a much larger cultural development within the Tiwanaku civilization. And that may be the greatest lesson of all. Puma Punku doesn't need aliens to be extraordinary. The humans who built it were extraordinary enough. The real mystery isn't how extraterrestrials could have built it, but how ancient people accomplished so much with the resources they had. Sometimes history isn't hiding supernatural secrets. Sometimes we simply haven't looked closely enough. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible mysteries and archaeological discoveries. And don't forget to check out the next video on your screen. See you there.